There is something that happens in a relationship that most people never talk about openly. It is subtle, it is quiet, and if you are not paying attention, you might miss it entirely. But once you see it, once you truly understand what it means, you cannot unsee it. And that is the moment when you start to realize that the person sitting across from you, the person you have been opening your heart to, may be quietly measuring you against someone else. Not out of cruelty, not always out of intention, but because of something deeply rooted in how people process connection, value, and emotional safety when they are still deciding whether to fully invest in one person. Today, we are going to talk about something that a lot of people feel but struggle to name. We are going to talk about the hidden signs that a woman may be comparing you to other men in her life. And I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This is not about blame. This is not about painting any person as a villain. This is about understanding human behavior with honesty, with compassion, and with the kind of emotional clarity that helps you make better decisions for your own peace of mind. Because understanding what is happening around you is one of the most important things you can do for your mental health. And yes, this is very much a mental health conversation because the anxiety you feel when something feels off in a relationship, the confusion you carry when you cannot quite explain why you feel undervalued, the emotional exhaustion of trying harder and harder without knowing why it never seems to feel like enough, all of that has a real psychological cost. And the people watching this video, the adults who have been in relationships long enough to know that love is not always simple, the caregivers who give so much of themselves that they often forget to protect their own emotional well-being, the individuals who are quietly trying to make sense of their own experiences without judgment, you deserve clarity. You deserve honest, grounded information that helps you understand yourself and the people in your life more deeply. So let us begin. The first hidden sign is that she frequently brings up other men in casual conversation, but always in a way that feels slightly evaluative. Now, this does not mean that every time a woman mentions another man, she is comparing you to him. People have lives, people have friends, coworkers, family members, and social circles that involve men and women both. That is completely normal. What I am talking about is something that has a particular texture to it. It is when the mention of other men is accompanied by a kind of subtle measurement. For example, she might say something like, "My coworker just got promoted and bought a new car," and the way she says it is not just sharing information. There is a pause afterward, a look, a silence that feels like it is waiting for your response. Or she might mention how a friend of hers, someone she knew before you, used to do a certain thing or handle a certain situation, and the way she describes it carries a quiet kind of admiration that feels directed at you as a reminder rather than just a fond memory. Psychologically, this behavior often comes from a place where a person has not yet fully decided to stop comparing and start committing. When someone is still holding emotional space for multiple people, their mind is actively running comparisons because that is how the human brain evaluates options before making a decision. And when that process is happening internally, it tends to leak out in conversation in these subtle evaluative moments. The important thing to notice is not the mention of another person. The important thing to notice is the emotional weight that comes attached to that mention. Does it feel informational or does it feel like a quiet test? Does it feel like she is sharing her life with you? Or does it feel like she is holding up a measuring tape? That distinction matters. The second hidden sign is that her level of effort toward you fluctuates in ways that feel tied to outside experiences rather than your relationship itself. This one is harder to name, but many people have felt it. There are days when she is warm, attentive, and genuinely present with you. And then there are days when she is distant, a little cold, or noticeably less engaged. And when you try to trace back what changed, you cannot find a reason within the relationship itself. Nothing happened between the two of you. No argument, no misunderstanding, no reason you can put your finger on. But something shifted. Behavioral science has a lot to say about this pattern. When a person is emotionally divided between more than one connection, their investment in each connection tends to rise and fall based on what is happening in the other connections at any given time. So if something positive is happening with someone else she is emotionally invested in, her emotional availability to you may temporarily decrease. And if that other dynamic hits a rough patch or pulls back, she may suddenly become much warmer toward you. The painful part of this pattern, and I want to acknowledge the pain of it directly, is that it creates a cycle of hope and confusion that is genuinely destabilizing. You start to feel like you are always chasing a version of her that only shows up sometimes. You begin to wonder what you did wrong on the day she pulls away. You start adjusting your behavior, trying to recover something that was never actually in your hands to control in the first place. That emotional cycle has a real psychological cost. Therapists who work with people navigating relationship uncertainty often describe this pattern as one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences a person can go through, precisely because the inconsistency keeps a person in a state of low-level emotional vigilance at all times. Your nervous system is always slightly on alert, always reading for signals, always trying to figure out what version of the relationship you are walking into on any given day. And that kind of sustained alertness is genuinely tiring in ways that go beyond just feeling emotionally drained. The third hidden sign is that she holds you to standards that seem to shift depending on the context. This is a particularly nuanced one, and I want to explain it carefully. Every relationship involves expectations. That is healthy and normal. Healthy expectations, when they are clearly communicated and consistently applied, are the foundation of mutual respect. But what I am describing here is something different. It is when the standard seems to change based on an invisible reference point that you cannot see, but she is clearly measuring against. For example, one week she might express that she values simplicity and that she does not care about material things. But then the following month, she seems suddenly more focused on what you earn, where you live, or what your plans look like 5 years from now. Not because her values changed organically over time, but because something she witnessed or experienced with someone else recalibrated what she believes she should expect. This is one of the quieter ways that comparison manifests. She may not even be fully aware that she is doing it. The psychology here is that when a person is exposed to a different option, whether through direct contact, social media, mutual social circles, or just awareness of what other people in her life are experiencing in their relationships, it can temporarily reset her baseline for what she believes is available to her, and that reset often shows up as suddenly higher or differently shaped expectations directed at the person she is currently with. The difficulty for you in this situation is that you are essentially being asked to compete with a moving target that you cannot see. And the emotional labor of trying to meet standards that keep shifting without explanation is something that deserves to be acknowledged and understood. The fourth hidden sign is that she asks questions about your past relationships or choices, but the questions feel more comparative than curious. There is a real difference between a partner who asks about your history because they want to understand who you are, and a partner who asks about your history because they are building a profile to measure against someone else. Genuine curiosity about a partner's past has a warmth to it. It is interested and open. It makes you feel seen, even when the questions touch on difficult territory. Comparative questioning feels different. It tends to be more focused on specifics that serve as data points. Things like, did you ever take her on trips? Did you used to put more effort in early on? What did you do differently then? These questions, especially when asked with a slightly clinical or evaluative tone, are often a sign that your responses are being placed side by side with someone else's responses, whether from direct conversations with another person or from the internal story she is telling herself about what she could have or what someone else might offer. The fifth hidden sign is that she responds to your gestures or efforts with comparisons that are presented as neutral observations but land as diminishments. This is a particularly important sign to understand because it can do real damage to a person's confidence over time if left unaddressed. It looks like this: you do something thoughtful, you plan something for her, you put in effort, you show up in a way that matters to you, and her response includes a comparison. She might say something like, "Oh, that is sweet. One of my friends has a partner who does something similar, but he always adds this extra thing." Or she might say, "I appreciate it. I just remember when someone used to make me feel a certain way, and it was different." She might frame these statements as casual observations. She might not even realize how they land, but they have a consistent effect of making your effort feel insufficient without ever directly saying so. Psychologically, this pattern is worth paying close attention to because it tends to erode something very quietly and very steadily. It erodes your sense of enoughness, and that erosion over time can lead to a particular kind of emotional wound that is hard to name and even harder to recover from, which is the wound of trying sincerely and feeling like it is never quite right, never quite enough, never quite the version that someone else apparently delivered more naturally. The sixth hidden sign is that her future plans for the two of you remain consistently vague, and she redirects conversations about commitment toward open-ended uncertainty. This is a sign that many people recognize intuitively, but hesitate to trust because the person they are with may be very warm and caring in every other way. But here is what the research on attachment and relational decision-making consistently shows. People who have genuinely chosen a partner tend to be able to move toward clarity about the future, even if the specific timeline is flexible. People who are still in a comparison process tend to keep the future deliberately undefined, not necessarily because they are being manipulative, but because closing the door on other possibilities feels premature to them. So when you bring up shared plans, when you talk about what the next chapter looks like, when you try to have an honest conversation about where things are going, and the response consistently circles back to vague, non-committal language about needing time or not wanting to rush or just enjoying the present, it may not simply be about pace. It may be about the fact that she has not yet arrived at the conclusion that you are the one she is choosing fully. And that ambiguity, while perhaps honest on her part, is something you deserve to understand clearly so that you can make informed decisions about your own heart and your own life. The seventh hidden sign is a subtle but consistent tendency to highlight your differences from some idealized or unnamed reference point. This shows up as the gentle but persistent articulation of ways in which you do not quite match a picture that lives somewhere in her mind. It might sound like, "I just feel like we see things differently than I expected." Or, "I thought I was someone who needed this from a relationship, and I am not sure you offer that." Or, "You are great, but there is just something I cannot put my finger on that feels missing." Now, every one of those statements on its own is understandable. People have honest feelings in relationships, and communicating them is important. But when these kinds of observations appear regularly, and when they tend to point toward a gap between who you are and some unnamed ideal that seems to keep moving, it is worth considering whether the unnamed ideal has a name, whether it is a real person, a composite of several people, or an image constructed from social comparison. The psychological effect of being constantly nudged toward a standard you can never quite see is the same. It creates what psychologists sometimes describe as a self-concept threat, which is a quiet but persistent feeling that who you authentically are is not quite the right version of a person. And that feeling, left untreated and unexamined, has a very real impact on how you see yourself long after any particular relationship has ended. The eighth hidden sign is that her emotional generosity toward you feels conditional on things that have nothing to do with your actual relationship. The way she treats you on any given day feels more dependent on outside variables than on the nature of what exists between the two of you. If she had a good experience elsewhere, she comes home colder. If something she wanted from another direction did not pan out, she is suddenly softer and more available with you. Emotionally, you sense that her warmth has a source you are not connected to, that her kindness sometimes feels like overflow from an experience that did not involve you rather than something that is genuinely directed at you as a specific and valued person. This is one of the most disorienting experiences in a relationship because love and warmth should, at their core, feel personal. They should feel like they are about you. And when you sense that they are not entirely personal, when you feel like you are benefiting from a residual warmth that was generated somewhere else, it creates a particular kind of loneliness that is difficult to describe. It is the loneliness of being physically present with someone while feeling emotionally invisible to them. Therapists who work with adults navigating relationship confusion often describe this as one of the most common hidden sources of relationship dissatisfaction, particularly for people who tend to be highly emotionally perceptive and whose intuitions about relational dynamics are usually accurate. Now, I want to take a moment here and speak directly to what you might be feeling as you listen to this. Because if any of these signs feel familiar to you, if reading through this list feels a little bit like someone has finally found words for something you have been carrying quietly, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. The confusion is real. The tiredness is real. The quiet erosion of confidence that can happen inside an experience like this is a real psychological experience that deserves acknowledgement, not dismissal. You are not imagining things. You are not being oversensitive. And you are not failing. Sometimes the situation itself is the problem, not the person trying to navigate it. And one of the most important mental health conversations we can have in this country right now is the one about the psychological cost of ambiguous relationships on the people who are fully committed but stuck in dynamic with someone who is not. Because the data on this is clear. Sustained emotional ambiguity in close relationships is a significant stressor. It activates stress responses in the body. It can disrupt sleep, concentration, and overall mood over time. And it can quietly chip away at a person's sense of self-worth in ways that persist long after the relationship ends. And we do not talk about this enough. We talk a lot about the big dramatic events in relationships, the betrayals, the arguments, the clear and obvious endings, but we talk much less about the quiet psychological toll of living inside a relationship where you are present and invested and the other person is still deciding. That experience is real, it is valid, and it deserves the same kind of care, attention, and support as any other form of emotional difficulty. So what do you do with this information? The first and most important thing is to give yourself permission to trust what you have been feeling. One of the most common things that happens when people are inside an experience like this is that they talk themselves out of their own perceptions. They tell themselves that they are being paranoid or insecure or reading too much into things. And sometimes that self-correction is healthy, but sometimes it is not. Sometimes the thing you are reading is real, and the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to acknowledge that. Trusting your own emotional intelligence is not arrogance. It is not being unfair to the other person. It is simply honoring the information that your own experience is giving you. The second thing is to be honest with yourself about what you actually need in a relationship, not what you are willing to accept in order to keep something together, not what you are hoping will eventually change, but what you genuinely need in order to feel valued, seen, and secure on a consistent basis. For many adults, especially those who have been in relationships long enough to know what love at its best can feel like, the honest answer to that question is clearer than we sometimes allow ourselves to admit. You need consistency. You need someone who has chosen you, not someone who is still deciding whether to close their other options. And there is nothing wrong with needing that. There is nothing demanding or unreasonable about wanting to be fully chosen by the person you are fully choosing. The third thing is to consider speaking to a therapist or counselor if you are carrying a heavy emotional load related to a situation like this. I want to say this gently, but directly. Therapy is not only for crisis. It is not only for people who are struggling in the most visible and dramatic ways. It is also for people who are quietly navigating complicated emotional experiences and who could benefit from having a trained, thoughtful person help them think things through with clarity and without judgment. And the access to mental health care in the United States has been expanding in meaningful ways. More insurance plans now cover mental health services at parity with physical health care. Telehealth options have made it possible for people to speak to a licensed therapist from their own home without needing to navigate transportation or scheduling challenges that used to be real barriers. Community mental health centers exist in most cities and many rural areas, often offering services on a sliding scale based on income. And for adults who are in the 40 and above age group, for caregivers who have spent years prioritizing everyone else, this may be the right moment to prioritize yourself. Not dramatically, not in a way that requires overhauling your entire life. Just by giving yourself access to a space where someone trained to listen and to help can sit with you and help you sort through what you are carrying. That is a reasonable and genuinely helpful step. And I say this not as a scripted suggestion, but as a sincere one, because the mental health of adults in midlife is deeply important and chronically underserved. And the work of understanding your own relational patterns is some of the most valuable work you can do for your own long-term well-being. Now, I want to address a few things that people sometimes misunderstand when they hear content like this. The first is the idea that noticing these signs means the relationship is doomed or that the other person is a bad person. That is not what this is about. People who are still in a comparison process are not inherently dishonest or uncaring. They may genuinely like you and care for you while also not yet being in a place where they have fully chosen you. Understanding that distinction matters because it protects you from unfairly judging the other person while also protecting you from accepting a situation that is costing you more than it is giving you. The second misunderstanding is that recognizing these signs is about becoming suspicious or guarded in relationships going forward. That is also not the message here. The goal is clarity, not defensiveness. The goal is to help you develop enough emotional self-awareness that you can read a situation accurately and respond to it from a place of grounded understanding rather than confusion or anxiety. A person who understands relational dynamics clearly is not a suspicious person. They are a perceptive person. And perceptiveness is a gift to both yourself and to any relationship you are genuinely in. The third misunderstanding is the idea that if you simply improve yourself enough, you can resolve a comparison dynamic by becoming the obvious winner. I want to be very honest about this one, because the truth is, comparison that comes from within a person is not solved by the actions of the person being compared. No amount of effort, achievement, or personal growth on your part can resolve someone else's internal ambivalence. That resolution can only come from within the person doing the comparing. And trying to fix an internal dynamic in someone else by relentlessly improving your own external presentation is not only exhausting, it is also ineffective, and it can lead to a deep and lasting confusion about your own worth. Because when you tie your sense of value to whether or not you can outperform unnamed competition in someone else's mind, you are placing your self-worth in a location that you have absolutely no ability to control. And that is a setup for a kind of suffering that no amount of achievement can resolve. Your worth is not contingent on being chosen. Your worth is not determined by where you rank in someone else's internal evaluation. Your worth exists independently of all of that, and it deserves to be recognized as such. Now, let me give you one practical and genuinely useful thing to carry with you from this conversation. If you find yourself in a situation that resonates with what we have discussed today, and you are not sure how to begin making sense of it, try this. Take some quiet time, away from the noise of the situation, and write down how you feel at the end of a typical day in this relationship. Not what happened, not what was said or not said, but how you feel. Do you feel seen? Do you feel valued? Do you feel secure? Or do you feel slightly off balance, slightly uncertain, slightly like you are always just one step behind something you cannot quite catch? Because those feelings, when you put them into words and look at them honestly, will tell you more about the actual state of your emotional well-being inside this relationship than anything else. And that information is yours. It belongs to you. Nobody else gets to define it or dismiss it. And once you see it clearly, you can begin to make decisions from a place of genuine self-knowledge rather than hope, confusion, or the kind of quiet denial that keeps people in situations that cost them more than they realize. Your emotional health matters. Your sense of being valued in the relationships you invest in matters. The quality of your inner life, not the performance of it, but the actual daily experience of how you feel in your most important relationships matters enormously. And you are allowed to prioritize that, not out of selfishness, not out of a lack of compassion for other people's complexity, but out of a sincere commitment to your own well being and to the kind of love that is mutual, chosen, and real. As we come to the end of this conversation today, I want to say something that I genuinely mean. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the kind of person who takes their inner life seriously enough to spend time thinking about it. That quality, the willingness to look honestly at your own experiences and the experiences around you, is not something everyone has, and it is not something to take for granted. The 8 signs we talked about today are not a checklist for building a case against someone. They are a framework for paying attention, for trusting yourself, for giving language to things you may have felt but struggled to articulate. And if this conversation sparked something in you, whether it was recognition, relief, or even a little grief over something you have been quietly carrying, I want to encourage you to sit with that. You do not have to resolve everything today. You do not have to make a decision or take an action right this moment. You just have to be honest with yourself about what you are experiencing. That honesty is the beginning of everything good that comes next. If you found value in this conversation today, please take a moment to let me know in the comments. Tell me what resonated with you. Share what you are sitting with. Ask a question if something came up for you that you want to think through more. This is a space for real conversation, and your thoughts and experiences matter here. And if someone in your life could benefit from hearing this, please share this video with them. Sometimes the most caring thing we can do for someone we love is to quietly put something in front of them that gives words to what they have been feeling but could not yet say. Take care of yourself. Prioritize your emotional health, and I will see you in the next one.